How can dermatologists harness the power of AI to achieve better patient outcomes and provide more accurate diagnoses? Welcome to the EADV podcast, the official podcast of the European Academy of Dermatology and Venereology. In today's episode, Professor Guttenmuth is joined by Professor Alexander Navarini, a clinician scientist in dermatology and the chairman of the Department of Dermatology and Allergy at the University of Basel. Together they discuss how AI can be a useful tool in dermatology practice, particularly in detecting melanomas and distinguishing them from other lesions. You will learn about the incredible potential of artificial intelligence and how it can revolutionize dermatology and complement the expertise of medical professionals. Abstract submissions for the upcoming EADV symposium taking place from the 16th to the 18th of May are now open. Don't miss the chance to present your research to a global audience. The deadline to submit abstracts is February the 13th, 2024. See the complete submission process and learn more at eadv.org. And now, enjoy the episode.
Today it's my pleasure to welcome Alexander Navarini. He is the head of the Dermatology Department of the University in Basel, Switzerland. And Alexander, you are one of our experts in artificial intelligence and its use in dermatology. We are struggling with this. It's coming up. Not many of us know what it's really about. So we would like to hear from you. What is artificial intelligence?
Right. What is it? Well, artificial intelligence is basically when you make a machine decide like a human. And this can be done in the most basic fashion. So, for example, early mechanical autopilots could also already be considered artificial intelligence. These mechanisms or algorithms, they were for a very long time inefficient and useless for the clinic. But because of the huge amount of data that is suddenly available, as well as because of the extreme computer resources that we now have that can even calculate with all these data, suddenly they have reached a level that is suddenly almost close to us, or even sometimes surpassing us in special situations. So AI has now elicited the interest of the dermatologists as well as emotions.
Yeah, I think I will ask you about that later. So, how do you think at the moment? Where are indications? Where can we use it already? Where can we have a level of trust? Where do you see at the moment the edge for using AI in the practice of a dermatologist?
I think we must differentiate between the sandbox, where we play with these algorithms. We see lots of papers that are coming out, and all these are not validated. So they are still far away from the clinic, even though they're impressive and it's amazing what they could do in the future for us. What is already present and certified partially as electronic devices, medical devices, is detection of melanoma and distinguishing them from benign lesions. That is something that one company, PhotoFinder, has now certified. Other American companies are in the process of doing that. So that's perhaps the most advanced example where a dermatologist can actually use artificial intelligence.
And then we can use it as decision support, I guess, because do these companies take liability, or will we pay for technology, or the patient will pay for technology, but the human still has to make the decision and take the responsibility?
Exactly. So the dermatologist, who unfortunately in most instances cannot bill the patient directly for this algorithm, he gets the advantage of additional information about the lesion. And this additional information can be very relevant. So once you see a score, how malignant such a lesion is, one tends to believe it, regardless of whether one understands how good it actually is. So the liability, though, is clearly in the hands of the humans and will stay for the time being. I so far cannot imagine a world where we would give the responsibility from dermatologists to the actual company. I think perhaps in the US there will be some special situations where such companies can still be sued, but not in Europe, I don't think.
Yeah, and that brings to me the mind, do we need to incorporate AI teaching? Do we need to start teaching our undergraduate students? Should we really learn, each of us, what is AI and how to use it to understand what we take into our hands? Will we have to make it part of specialty training? Is that one of the things that you imagine for the future?
Wouldn't that be great? To teach all the dermatology residents programming, for example. The reality is that we're not going to do that. I think we can be lucky if we even get the residents to have a solid dermoscopy training. Residents will be constantly exposed to AI. It will be a tool like the dermatoscope, like the dermablade, like any new advances that we incorporate in practice. But few will actually be able to look behind the scenes. But I think the practical knowledge is already quite useful and perhaps even sufficient. I think we must actually make sure that we don't shrink our teaching too quickly, for example, exactly in dermoscopy. Because of course, once you have an algorithm that can classify a lesion with 99% certainty, why would you even learn dermoscopy? So far, though, it's not the case. Even though there's many publications that show that AI is better than American dermatologists, but now also some German dermatologists.
Yes.
These were situations where the image quality was already great. This was done with static images. So real life competition where dermatologists are able to touch a lesion, evaluate it from different angles. That actually hasn't been shown.
So that, I think, is it true? Can we say that the more information available, the better the decisions are? So if you have more pictures or additional information, patient has certain risk factors, or adding even the human in the decision, does this give higher accuracy?
To some extent. This has actually been studied. So when we give one picture to the algorithm, or three with slightly different angles, it's actually better if you take the three. And the way this works, not to complicate it for our audience too much, but basically an algorithm will get one picture and then it will make a list of what conditions this could be. Perhaps melanoma is on top of the list, and then second, the nevus, and so on. Then the second and the third picture will be done separately. And then you take these hit lists and you merge them basically. And then from that, you take the average differential. So with that, algorithms can be more accurate. But if you then go and take 5, 6, 7, 100, it doesn't get much better. What was also shocking, and so please don't tell the residents, is that the history taking doesn't help the algorithm too much. So perhaps the most informative detail in a recent publication was to know whether the patient had a history of psoriasis. But for example, whether the patient had, an example, a history of melanoma or something like that, even though we insist that the residents should take all that information, we couldn't show with the current methods that this is very useful to increase the accuracy of such an algorithm. But perhaps with other techniques it will be.
And it makes me think of a skin check that we regularly do in the clinics. And there also, I have to say, of course, we do the history, but you anyhow look at the patient from head to toe. And we have our human intelligence algorithm, and there also the history almost plays no role in our decisions. So, Alexander, where's at the moment the cutting edge in research in dermatology on artificial intelligence? Is it also going towards the direction of decision support or maybe scoring diseases? I think you are quite active when it comes to pustule analysis, hand eczema. Where are we going here?
In my opinion, and there's many opinions what should be done with AI, of course, in dermatology. In my opinion, AI should be seen as a humble tool that makes the life of dermatologists easier. So decision support is certainly one. What we are working on, and I'm a specialist on inflammatory skin diseases, we are working on getting more free time for dermatologists. So we have a program in the clinic, it's called WAMEC, so weniger Admin, mehr Klinik. And so we have algorithms that, for example, count pustules on the palms of the hands in palm plantar pustulosis. And another publication we recently made is an algorithm where you can take photos of the hands, so palms, and then the dorsal hands. It will then detect where eczema lesions are found. And it will also, at the same time, check where, in what region of the hands these eczema lesions actually are. And the result is then not a table and so on for the clinician, but the result is just one sentence. So this patient has on the palm 20% involved by eczema, on the fingers 10%, and you can just copy paste that into the patient file. And that is for me the gold standard of actual AI support without that you actually see the AI. So we don't want to see the computer script. We don't want to see zeros and ones. We just want to be assisted. And I think with these types of AI, we can do that.
I think that is the WAMEC, you called it. I will introduce this to our hospital. So in English, it was less administration, more clinic. And the intelligent use of IT, I think, is a problem in all healthcare systems. We get more IT, but we see less patients because we are doing more. And even the administration that was fast on paper is now slow in a computer. That's at least my personal experience.
I think we must, as dermatologists, really try to go against that.
Absolutely. And here you have really an example how AI can help you to perform your task quicker and free time for the patient.
Exactly. Now we are, just to finish this example, we are now in the validation stage. And this is something that gets more and more important because the initial excitement about AI is fading. And now come the regulators and the people who look really in detail and make sure that whatever comes out of these algorithms is actually the truth and not just some artifact, because the risk is, of course, very high. It is incredible how quickly people believe what the computer says. So we must make sure that we protect them from false information.
I saw some interesting examples, for instance, when there was a benign melanocytic lesion, and when the picture was taken and there was a millimeter scale next to the pigmented lesion, it was detected as melanoma because the algorithm detected something strange in the environment of this lesion and added them up. And when they removed the scale, it was detected correctly as a benign melanocytic lesion. So I thought I heard this combination of artificial intelligence plus human intelligence is still important. And I think, Alexander, you're also active in teledermatology. I think that's the next field where AI will be maybe applied. There are already apps where you can upload a picture for melanocytic. There's one company that offers where you take a picture and it tells you whether this is potentially dangerous or not, or whether you should see a dermatologist.
Skinvision.
Yes.
And so we have a prospective study, a MELVEC study, that we are running in Basel. And in the beginning, we also included the Skinvision app. And we could show, that was Dr. Maul and colleagues. We could show that this app creates a 30 times over detection of suspicious lesions. So if all these lesions were excised without a second look by the dermatologist, that would be an amazing morbidity that this creates. So we have to be very careful. And this app is actually classified as a class 1 medical device. So obviously that is not sufficient.
And I understand they need to be done, that they are a bit more cautious than they might be to not miss a melanoma. But I had this perception that this creates extra consultations because people check themselves and then they come to us because they get this go and see your dermatologist. So yes. Maybe that brings us to the question, do we need to be afraid about our future as dermatologists? Will we be substituted by computers?
I think if you just take the patient file that we just talked about, it clearly shows that the more you're supported by computers, the more work you have to do somehow, isn't it? Because I think the level of quality that is expected of you rises accordingly. So I'm 100% sure that we will not be replaced by computers, except if we at some point have a Westworld-like scenario. But we will just be assisted and we will be extremely good, infallible perhaps at some point for many diagnoses, and that's great. So we can concentrate hopefully on being with the patient, talking, reassuring, making interventions, all these things that we love to do.
I think that sounds already like a very, very good future for us. I wanted to ask you one last thing about the passion project with which you are working. Can you give us some more details on this?
Yes, thanks for the question. So we're all aware that the prevalence of skin diseases in Africa is amazingly high. And per country in Africa, except South Africa, there is a one-digit number of dermatologists. And medical officers who are typically in charge of seeing those patients as family physicians, they are often not trained in dermatology, so they cannot even recognize the simplest diseases, impetigo, ringworm, scabies. And these have all prevalences of 20-30%. So with teledermatology, we can easily detect these skin conditions, and they are easily treatable as well because all these drugs are extremely cheap. You can find them at the most remote village. That's not a problem. But the sheer volume of patients cannot be handled by any dermatologist, especially people who are not trained on pigment-rich skin, as we call it now. So it's not black skin anymore. And so we make a study where we compare the actual human consultation with an AI that is specifically trained on pigment-rich pictures for a small number of skin conditions in children. And the endpoint would be that we would then really offer a free consultations with decision support for medical officers or parents, if no medical officer is available, to detect skin conditions. And because it's impetigo, scabies, ringworm, and eczema, there is little risk of any problems ensuing if perhaps in a very small percentage the diagnosis should not be correct at first. But it is something that I think would not be of great interest here in Europe because there's more or less sufficient dermatologists. But in other countries, of course, resource poor regions, that's really a need. And we're very excited about that project. And WHO will also now work with us. So I hope we can pull this off.
So I think that has some really interesting prospects then for the future. You explained to us how AI will help us to level up our quality by hopefully also saving time. And on the other hand, that we'll be able to scale access to dermatology care, and that in even the most remote areas of the world. So I'm very thankful that you taught me about this. I think these are, and the next thing is that we don't have to be afraid. That is also a good thing. We will be there in the future. Alexander, is there anything that you would like to share with our audience? Any last thought that you think is important we should take home?
Dermatology is going to change into a more interventional specialty as soon as we have stronger AI. So you're going to spend less time looking up things and more time actually doing interventions. That's why we changed the education of our residents slowly, that they both learn more surgery skills as well as more aesthetics. That's one thing. The second thing, I am deeply against this dichotomy of medical and aesthetic dermatology. And I think this should be fused again, as many of us do both things. And there is a needless polarization. So these are my last two issues that I will now package for the audience to hear. Thank you very much, Jan, for the invitation.
Alexander, thank you for coming. And thank you to our listeners. And we hope we have you again with us soon. Bye-bye.
Before you go, a quick favour. If you are a regular listener to our podcast, we would love to hear from you. Your feedback will help us improve the show and develop episodes that you are interested in hearing. To participate in the short survey, simply follow the link in the show notes of this episode. Thank you for your support. It means a lot. We look forward to hearing from you. Until the next episode, take care of your skin.